We're going to call the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, January 4th, 2022 to order. Would you please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get started, the town has issued a mask mandate for town buildings unless we can social distance 6 feet or greater. So if you can be 6 feet away from each other and don't wish to wear your mask, then you can remove your mask. If you want to keep it on, you can, when you speak, you can take your mask down when you speak. Larry, do you want to start comments?
I will. Thank you, Michael. I've been traveling, and so I just learned coming in tonight that Joel McFarland passed away. Senior. Thank you for that, because there's a younger Joel McFarland, very active as well. But Joel McFarland Senior, I knew he was very sick. I just got that information before I left town. I think we discussed before this meeting, Michael, all of us had worked with Joe. He was a long-term planning board director. He was active in other Allen Harbor's Yacht Club, for instance. He's very active in, well-known across town, and stayed active until a few weeks ago, actually. He was a practicing lawyer and still did some part-time legal actions. But great supporter of all town activities. We all remember him talking, giving the planning report at town meetings year after year. He'll be sorely missed. He was not only did a lot of work, he was a lot of fun to be around. And that's important as well.
Thank you, Larry. Julie, anything to add?
No, I would echo Larry's thoughts, and I would say that, we did. Harwich lost a really important person, and I'm sad to hear that news as well. I really enjoyed getting to know Joe, so it's very sad.
Mary?
He was also one of the trustees at the pantry and just brought a great spirit to anything he did. Just a really great guy.
Don?
Well, gosh, before they deify him, I'm going to actually mention that he was the biggest teddy bear, gregarious guy that I knew around town, a real character. And I'll miss him for that.
Yeah. Be missed by all. Thank you. Public comments and announcements. Carolyn, we're starting with you tonight.
Mind if I keep my mask on?
You can.
Thank you.
Obvious.
Thank you. Carolyn Carey, Community Center Director. I wanted to come before you tonight and just let you know that we are going to attempt to have some indoor movies on Friday nights in January. We are still planning on having those. It is open and free to the public. We'll provide snacks and things like that, but there are schedules around town on our website, and they are all rated PG Disney movies, so hopefully we can have lots of events still. The second event is that we are getting ready at the community center to turn 22 years old.
Carolyn, could I just interrupt you for a second?
Of course.
To the gentleman that just walked in, the town is under a mask mandate. You do not have to wear your mask if you can social distance 6 feet, but if you're going to sit next to those folks, put your mask on, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. So we're turning 22. So in order to prepare for our 22nd birthday party, we have decided to ask you to duck in and help us celebrate. There are 22 of this size duck, all dressed differently, hidden around the town of Harwich, safely hidden. You don't need to climb anything to get them, please. They have directions on them if you should find it. You just bring it into the community center and you'll receive a prize in addition to keeping your duck, but you do have to bring it in because they are coded and numbered so that we can make sure we get them all. Then on February 5th, we are going to give out baby ducks. You can pick them up anytime if you'd like to decorate them. And we're going to, on February 5th at 1 o'clock, have a duck toss. There's a large duck in the middle of the gym floor with a bullseye in the middle of it, and everyone will label their duck, and we'll see who comes closest and give out prizes. Just a way to celebrate the 22nd birthday, so thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Anyone else, public comment announcement? Consent agenda?
I move that we vote to approve the consent agenda with 4 items. First, to approve the request to close from December 25th, 2021 to March 31st, 2022 for Villa Roma, 278 Route 28. Second, to approve the Board of Selectmen meeting minutes for July 12th, 2021. Third, to approve a Caleb Chase request in the amount of $1,000. And fourth, to approve a second Caleb Chase request in the amount of $1,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. New business, I would take B. I'm not sure anyone's here from Conservation Trust yet. Why don't we go with B? And Mary, I would take a
Okay?
motion.
Do you want them together or separate?
Separate, please.
I move that we vote to approve the following 2022 common viculars license renewal for Cape Roots Market and Cafe, DBA Cape Roots Market and Cafe, 557 Route 28.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move that we vote to approve the following 2022 common viculars license renewal for Beachlight LLC, DBA Seal Pub, 703 Main Street.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'm going to continue down the agenda and go back to A if Michael Locke shows up. If not, we'll have the discussion anyway. Old business discussion and possible vote on the Cultural Center use and gym fee schedule. I'm not sure if the rest of you share my thoughts that that was a very confusing document. And we did receive some correspondence from a resident today. I'm going to pull up what I would suggest we vote on tonight. Let's see if the board agrees. Bear with me. Megan Eldridge. We got a memo. I got a memo this afternoon from Megan Eldridge, our Assistant Town Administrator. So the real ask and the pressing, so there's several changes that happened in the fee schedule, none of which make sense to me at all. And none of it shows what the costs are. And I believe to Selectman Howell, at least, that was very important. That was very important to myself. We did hear from 2 residents on the importance of pickleball and the request that's been made to use the pickleball on Tuesdays. So the ask from Eric is separate pickleball program Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8 a.m. till noon, 2 days, 8 hours, and charge $45 per person for the season, with $20 to go to the cultural center and the rest to go to rec. So the sign up on that would be for $20, and the end of the season, they're showing April 30th. So tonight my ask would be, does the board want to support the program for those months at that fee with $20 going to the cultural center? The building's open and the gym isn't being used at that time. I do not believe myself that the costs are being covered, but we are already there Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'll start with Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm assuming each of you, under separate cover, got an email from Mr. Gunderson?
I did.
Okay, so that the public understands, we all got that separately, but he had discussed something that Mr. Ballantyne's discussed in the past about coming up with amortized costs per square foot of operating stuff. And the interesting thing is, when I looked at it, I'm still where I was. When I looked at it, I was like, okay, but isn't a gym more like a pool than it is like an artist room? There's liability issues that I'm not sure, having not even looked at our policy yet, I'm not sure. We're deep pockets. I don't care when anybody signs a waiver. Waiver's not even worth the paper it's printed on if you go to file a lawsuit against the town for negligence somehow. There's the floor of the thing and the sodium halogen lights, sodium vapor lights that are there. They cost a lot more than fluorescent lights to do it. And it's not like it's there, why don't we use it? Those lights aren't on when there's not somebody in the gym. So, I mean, when I look at that, we're underwater before you even consider those other things, like how much is it going to cost to replace the floor? How much is it going to cost to run the lights? I'm not prepared to accept a schedule that, quote, meets a minimum that I'm not even sure is really the minimum.
Thank you. Mary?
I'm going to take the exact opposite tack. There's nothing going on there right now. We've got a bunch of people that want to play pickleball. The highway department confirmed that the lights have been changed to LEDs, so I don't think there's a light issue. I agree, Mr. Gunderson did an exceptional analysis of the costs, but in the meantime, it's sitting empty. We need somebody to manage that, which Joe has made a proposal that we have someone manage that as well as do grant writing. I say in the meantime, let the pickleballers have it. It's a little money coming in. There's nobody that's asked for those mornings. I'm in favor. I see no harm.
Larry?
Well, this is good. This will be a good debate then. Because we keep pushing this down the road. We keep asking. I can't imagine a business, for instance, anyone setting their prices, in this case our fees, with absolutely no input from what the costs are. And that's what we're being asked to do, and we've been asked to do that in the past. And I keep making this point, I will again. I won't vote for this as such, because at some point we have to draw the line, in my opinion. Say, okay, what are the operational costs? What are the maintenance costs? What are the long-term capital costs? You know, I think people need to understand it. My sense is, if it's understood, people will vote for it. And I probably vote for it. But to go in blind and not know those expenses, I think is a disservice. I felt this way in the past. I actually feel more that way now, because I think, based on our previous discussions, we're leaving, this is probably the wrong phrase to use, but we're leaving a lot on the table right now, I feel, in the cultural center. We have things we could do to make that much more productive or asset to the town. You know, we have a kitchen that could be improved. We have, that will take investments. And we should do that possibly, but we can't do it without any information. And that's where we are now. And I would wait until, I know Joe's putting this together. I think we owe it to ourselves, and I think, quite frankly, we owe it to the residents to say, okay, this is what the costs are. And as I say, my sense is people will go for it, but I think it's a mistake not to lay it out.
Julie?
So I'm going to go in the opposite direction. I'm going to go back
Sounds like I'm the split vote.
with Mary, because to your point, I understand that Mr. Gunderson's analysis was quite good. But I also sat on this board when we made a decision to try to create a use of the middle school, which is now our cultural center, and it's worked out quite well. And I agree with you that there's more to be done and there's more analysis to be done. And I think it's important that we're looking logistically and financially at what is most important and what works best for the town. On the same token, and Carolyn did an amazing job working from nothing. And here we are. It's become a thriving community. But we also have space that's available, not conflicting with any other program, school or otherwise. And to Mary's point, it's available. They're only looking currently, as when Eric was in front of us, to say that they would go for the spring, until the spring, and see what happens after that. The lights are not an issue in the sense that we have had them confirmed at the LED. So as much as I believe that more analysis has to be done, and we're creating this new position, somebody's going to be hired to run that whole thing, that's great. But we're not there yet, and we have space available that could bring us a little bit of money in the meantime. So I'm in favor of it.
Do you want to add something, Mary?
I just want to add one more thing. I get you, Larry, because I agree. I feel that way about costs and agreed with Mr. Gunderson. But everybody else who's in the building, all of our artists, they're not there under any cost analysis. I don't know where those numbers came from. So I don't know why pickleball has to be punished. They're all old folk like me. I think we ought to help them out.
Well, if I could respond.
Go ahead.
First off, I do appreciate what, Carolyn, you've done putting this together. This is a different issue, though. This is what the costs are, the analyses of that. rather than getting the programs in. The pickleball comes up now only because of timing. I'd be making the same case if we're talking about the fees for the artist areas. You know, that's not what's in front of us. If it were, I'd be making the same argument. It's only for me a matter of timing.
Okay, I just want to respond.
Go ahead, dive in.
So,
We
and
got
again,
15 minutes to waste.
appreciating all of the financial discussion, I think we're all on the same page on that. But we're not, we don't even have the new person yet who's going to run this, and we're looking at the numbers, and Joe's doing his part. But in the meantime, we have empty space, and we have a use that people have requested, and they're going to pay a fee. So it's not going to be a moneymaker, I get that, but it brings some more money in and allows people to use, you know, the courts for what they want to use it for. And I think it's more than pickleball, to the point that, you know, in our last meeting, which I can't remember if that was 2 weeks ago, I think, you know, it's not just the pickleball, it's the socialness of it, it's the routine, it's all of those other pieces. Now that, I don't necessarily know you can put a price tag on. So in the meantime, we have this empty space that we can get some money for. I say, you know, they go in knowing that things may change and fees may increase, but in the meantime, why not let them use the space?
All right, my turn.
Don't get me into this.
So I agree with all of you. And Larry, I've heard you for 2 terms that we've served together. I cannot continue to make excuses for the fact that we can't put together simple spreadsheets with costs. But we have. And I think we're a ways away from getting that person and getting those fees. And therefore, I would agree with Julie that I don't want to punish the pickleballers because we haven't done our work yet. I'm putting that back on administration, and I would never vote to rent anything else in there again unless we have a cost analysis. The pickleball group is a great group of mostly locals and out-of-towners, and all of our taxpayers pay taxes, and therefore some of their taxes can be allocated to that building. And I hope that they all come out and support the cultural center and keeping it when we go to town meeting with a real plan to keep that building rather than demolish it or try and turn it into housing. I'll keep, that's it for comments at this point. I do know that we have to, Larry, get a cost analysis, and it's important. Mr. Gunderson's email to us today was as thorough as every email Mr. Gunderson says, so I have no reason not to believe it, but that was one person's email, one person's analysis. Town staff has not gone through it. I don't know where all the numbers came from. It makes sense to me, and I have to believe he's correct because he's a very thorough person. But leaving it empty 2 days a week from 8 to 12 really gains us nothing. Larry?
And I'm a reasonable person.
I also know that.
I just, sometimes. But my frustration at this point is that we keep pushing this down. So if the deadline is April 30th is when this season runs over, for me, I think we should absolutely stick to our guns and have this full analysis. Or we do, shut it down. You know, we can't continue to operate in my opinion, well, I've said it enough. We need to move ahead.
Well, and the board shouldn't be being presented with numbers from a resident, not staff,
Exactly.
the night we're going to vote for this. And again, this memo means nothing to me that was sent from the rec director. Now, he called, he could not be here tonight. I asked him to put together what he could because I didn't want to make people wait even longer. So, can I get a motion?
I move that we vote to, I lost it. I move that we vote to approve the pickleball use of the gym at the Cultural Center Tuesdays, where did it go? Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8 a.m. till noon, at the price listed in
$45 per the season.
45 for the season.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
Only I'd like is, this may be overstated, but I'd like as part of the motion that we'll have a firm cost analysis done by name of date.
March 1st.
I'll go with it.
I don't know that you can,
Why don't we just do that as a comment to the town administrator? And I even put it back on the agenda so that when he's here, he can do it. So the motion stands as it was, the second stands as it was. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Larry, you're an aye?
Yeah, as I said I would, but I'm going to hold
On
the
that,
March
okay.
1st. because-
4-1. Thank you. I would go on to B under old business, Mary.
Okay. I move that we vote to approve the 2022 entertainment license for Lanyard Bar and Grill, 429 Route 28, weekday noon to 10 p.m. inside and outside, Sunday 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. inside and outside. The entertainment type is recorded or live music with amplification.
This is coming, oh, God, can I get a second on that for discussion?
A second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. This is coming back to us. It was on, I believe, 2 weeks ago, maybe last week, and some boxes weren't checked on the application. With that discussion from the board, Larry?
None.
Julie?
Well, I did have a question. I'm trying to get back to it. It looked to me like it was increasing. Did I misread that?
So-
By an hour?
12 to 10 p.m. inside and outside, Sunday 1 to 10. Last year, 2021, it was 12 p.m. to 12 a.m. inside, 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. outside. So it is increasing 2 hours weekday.
No,
and
decreasing.
No, it is increasing, isn't it?
12 to 10, no, it's decreasing.
Oh, it's
Decreasing 2 hours,
I read it wrong.
and it's decreasing by 1 hour.
Okay, so
on the
no,
other
then I have no other comment.
Okay. Sorry about that, I was reading from the wrong line. So Larry had nothing, Julie, you're all set? Mary,
I'm all set.
Don,
Feel like the Grinch who stole Christmas here, but once again, I've been pretty much established over the last year that I'm pretty hostile to outdoor amplified anything at the moment because the whole town's gotten somewhat out of control. So as long as this is amplified music, which it appears to be, it's not just ambient or TV or something, then I can't support it.
okay. My only comment is that this establishment has had no complaints. They've had the same entertainment license for as long as I can remember. We've talked about it in the past, and attorneys have suggested that we have to do everything exactly the same, and I disagree. Can I get, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion, Mary?
Just that I agree with you that I think they're benefiting by their location. They're not disturbing anyone, and that's life, real estate's location. So no, I'm in favor of this.
Any further discussion?
None.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
All right.
All right, so we are gonna go right back up to what we didn't do. And that is discussion and possible vote to approve from the Harwich Conservation Trust for temporary storage at 203 Bank Street. There is a presentation that was gonna be shown by Michael Locke. We all have it in our packet. And Caleb, there was a photo up there a little while ago of some trees with some roots on it.
Yeah, I think Michael was meant to be here. I'm not sure if he
I think he's outside.
Oh, I see Michael Locke walking in the door.
Just in time.
Just in time. So join us. You're up, Michael. You're up. Any way you want to be. You can pull your mask down to talk if you'd like. Okay. And the board has had this in its packet. You and I discussed this today because we got some correspondence, and I'll leave it up to the board on whether or not they want to vote on anything tonight. But if you could give us kind of a brief run-through. We have a hearing at 6:30, but we'll keep you as long as we need to.
Thank you very much. I'm Michael Locke, Executive Director of the nonprofit Harwich Conservation Trust. Thanks for your time this evening. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
As an introduction to the proposal for you to consider this evening, just a brief overview of the Coldbrook Ecological Restoration Project. This is a partnership project between the Harwich Conservation Trust and Town of Harwich and the state's Division of Ecological Restoration and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So we have nonprofit, municipality, state, federal government partnership. The goal, as you see in the green shaded area, is to enhance, restore roughly 44 acres of wetland habitat, nearly 1 mile of Coldbrook stream, which flows through the area and then eventually to Saquatucket Harbor. Naturally reduce nitrogen on its way to Saquatucket Harbor so that we can reduce the town's sewering costs and therefore save taxpayer money over time. And then enhance the visitor experience by improving public access with Phase 1 and 2 of the Harwich Natural Heritage Trail. Caleb, would you mind switching to the next set of slides? The focus of this evening's proposal is for you as a board to consider allowing Harwich Conservation Trust to store woody material consisting of tree trunks about 20 feet long, 10 inches or so in diameter. That would fluctuate depending on the trees. Some with root wads, some without. The purpose of this material is to jumpstart wildlife habitat creation when we actually go to eco-restoration construction. That's estimated to occur somewhere in the next 12 to 18 months. We're in the final 25% design phase, and then we move into the permitting phase, and then we move into eco-restoration construction. Regarding previous projects that our design consultant, Interfluve, has been involved with in southeastern Mass, Plymouth, other retired bog locations, the best approach has been to acquire this material over several months. It takes time to secure it, deliver it, store it, and then it'll be ready for access and use at the time of eco-restoration construction. These slides that you've just seen are representative of some of the material that we're also considering using at the Coldbrook site. And Nick Nelson is here from Interfluve to also help answer any questions. That's the proposal in summary.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. Comments from the board? I'll start with Larry.
Thank you, Michael. Now, the logs will be fresh cut trees, or they will be dead trees? Where do you collect the logs from?
I'm going to let Nick speak to his experience. He's been through this several times on other sites.
Because I think Michael, you referred to this, we did get a couple letters concerned about, wildlife hanging out and causing problems and other bugs. So I guess that's my one question. My second one is 12, 18 months, is that the total time you would need the storage, or is it less? In other words, are they brought there, then you spend some months taking it out?
Yeah, great question. My name is Nick Nelson, by the way, with Interfluve, working with Mike. And to your first question, these are typically fresh cut when people are doing land clearing or there's a storm in a town and DPW needs a place to store them. We'll often work with the town to do that on these other projects. So it's often either freshly fallen or fresh cut trees that we're looking for. Those are the ones that we would prefer to have on site. And I would say we're shooting to begin construction towards the fall of this year, and we anticipate the work to go for 8 to 10 months or so. So depending on when we get the wood actually to the site, that will determine the length of time that they're sitting there. But it could be, as Mike was saying, they could be sitting there for anywhere from 10, 12, 16 months. Once we begin construction, we'll start bringing those into the bog work itself right away and start installing them into the channel like we saw in a couple of projects.
Thank you.
Yep. Julie?
So is there any assessment of, as the logs are brought in, and as you say, they come in waves, is there any assessment of the logs in terms of knowing whether or not there's any kind of infestation of any bugs? Again, to Larry's point and the chair's point, we have had concerns from neighbors, and I can understand that.
Yep, absolutely. Great question. And just based on our experience with some of these other projects, one of the projects was in Falmouth, and similar stacking of wood across the road from residences, so very similar distance to what we have here at Coldbrook. And they were left there for about a year to 18 months, and there were no comments from neighbors, no concerns from neighbors about those types of infestations. So we want these pieces of wood to be coming fresh cut, as you said, so they're not coming with any beetle infestations or anything like that. We have never had that experience of rats, mice, or anything else that create a problem. So we've never had to address that, but certainly we, trying to keep a clean site like we have on other projects.
Okay, and in terms of if there were any issues, I know one of the residents raised, and I thought it was a good point, who's going to be the point of contact to address those issues and get out in the field to say, we've looked at this, or we don't see an issue here, but we might see an issue over here. I mean, we as a board would want to be able to make sure that info is out to the public in case there is an issue to the neighbors. Would that be HCT? Yeah, okay. Would be Michael, okay. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Mary?
My concerns were similar. One thing I did wonder if it wouldn't be better to have a meeting with some of the neighbors. There's at least 2 that have written to us, and, it could be announced so that others could join in before we sign off on this. They're very concerned about ticks, and they know they're near a habitat where there's already animals, and they're just concerned about what that might do to their property in terms of things. Is that something you could do, and then, or we could even approve it pending a meeting with the neighborhood?
Yeah, what's your thought, Mike?
Thank you for raising that, and I appreciate the neighbors speaking up and letting this group know of their concerns. And I see this as an information gathering opportunity for you and the public, and a step in the process for determining if this is the location to store the materials, and if not, after listening to neighbors and determining whether we can move forward or not with your board, perhaps we choose an alternative location. So that's how I see this process at this point.
So I think that's a yes.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah. So if we don't vote tonight, we could certainly set up the
Okay.
meeting with the neighbors, and Michael agreed today
Yeah.
that this could be an initial meeting. Don?
Okay, I'm good with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mine goes in a completely different direction, and I have a question. What delineates this from a stump dump? And how is that different? Because a stump dump would require a state permit to put, for instance, if the truck that was bringing these logs took a left turn and dumped it in another field, that would be illegal. Are we getting a permit to store them, or is there something that's different? Because I went on the Mass DEP site, and it itself is a dark, dense place.
That's true.
I mean, I think I can answer that. It's not a dump. We're storing them for use on an ecological project. So they're not going to be decaying on site, so it couldn't be considered a dump.
That's what I'm asking. What's different about this by definition under state statute?
I think it's temporary storage, and we're in the middle of the permitting process right now. So all of, the entire project will be going through DEP permitting, through Conservation Commission permitting, and through federal permitting as well. So it's, again, this is something that has not come up on other projects either, and nobody has raised that as a concern from the state or local entities. So I agree in terms of it being more of a temporary staging rather than a permanent stump dump.
Is there any way of verifying that with DEP, though?
I can look into that. I can reach out. Sure.
So I'm going to take a completely different tact, and I alluded it to Michael today, but I didn't tell him straight up that I don't support this, but I don't support this. We're about to sell the building. We talked about that today. And there's many other options. Certainly might be more expensive options, because of the trucking that would be involved. But we have an awful lot of people that believe in this project. And 12 months from now is next January. 15 months from now is next April, and it's before we really get busy cleaning sides of roads and mowing and beaches. And we have 10-wheelers, and we have front-end loaders, and we have an awful lot of equipment to move this stuff. Why wouldn't we store it at the dump, so long as Link gives us his blessing to store it at the dump, or another location that isn't on the main throughway to Harwich Port from Harwich Center? Any thought given to that, Michael, other than our conversation today?
So that would fall into the alternate site thinking, and we're open to listening and exploring that in partnership with the town. If you want to reach out to Link on that and discuss it, or I can, or it's an idea.
I think I would, with the board's blessing, direct the town administrator to have the conversation. This is, you said at the beginning, this is a town of Harwich project, right? So it's not Harwich Conservation Trust doing something for Harwich Conservation Trust. It's Harwich Conservation Trust really doing something for the town of Harwich. So why we wouldn't support it would be completely beyond me, but we own a dump. And as far as I'm concerned, we can find a chunk of that dump to do what you showed in that picture. And that would be the direction I would want to go. Don?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. That would allay my fears about, because there's nobody here that's going to be able to dictate when they start rotting. I mean, if they were off in at the dump on a pad somewhere, then I'm not concerned about the DEP licensing or anything.
As far as I'm concerned, the board shouldn't consider it because we voted to sell the building. We're waiting for a little bit of work to be done to put it on the market, and I don't imagine it's going to last very long. If it's anything like the West Howard School, we could be talking about that for a lot longer, but I don't think so. I think this is a desirable property that's going to sell. So we will be asking at that point for the new owners to let us leave our logs there, or we'll be moving them to the dump and then back to the bog. Thoughts from the board, Mary?
No, I hadn't thought of that part, but I agree with you on that location. Do you want me to make a motion so we can take a vote?
When we make a motion, actually, we don't need a motion. We just need consensus of the board to have the town administrator have a conversation with the DPW director, and we'll get back to Michael with the answer. I don't think we even need to vote something like this. Consensus of the board, Don?
Yep.
Mary?
Yes.
Julie?
Yeah.
Larry?
Yes.
Great, thank you all.
We'll make something work.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you. I think we're onwards. Public hearing, 6:30 PM. Presentation and possible votes on the proposed amendments to the Monemoy Regional School District Agreement. Good evening, Dr. Carpenter. Happy New Year. Good evening, Michael. I don't.
No.
I don't.
We got something today, but
Yeah, I think you do. right
do we
there.
have it?
Ours
Oh.
looks pretty thin compared to that.
Two
Yeah, we-
packages, right?
Yeah, we have,
I have it.
Okay, thank you. So, while Michael's passing things out, I'll just orientate you to what we've tried to do, given some of the feedback that we got last time. And I'd like to thank Don, I think, had it in the back of my head, and also Joe. I think Joe was, talking about, red line version and being colorblind, this, that, and the other. And the red line version was, I think, getting in the way of clarity. And I think Don, at the last meeting said, it'd be nice to be able to see both the things side by side. So what we've done is we have just taken the red line version and taken all the information out to just have, here's the existing agreement, here's the change, and line them up side by side and get rid of all of the red line version so that we can just have it clear. And I think by doing this, it's focused enough that we can just walk through this and really talk about side by side. So what you have before you is what we are sort of proposing. That is, this is the existing regional agreement, and anywhere in it that there is a change. The orientation of the page has been turned so that it's side by side with, here's the existing language that's in white, and in the pink area, lined up right next to it is, here's where it's changing, and we put in a little blue explanation box anytime something's changed to explain what the change is and why. So, so we'll just spend some time sort of just briefly, talking about how we got here, and then we'll go through the document, because there aren't a lot of changes after you take all the red line strikeouts, and we can just focus on what's changing and why.
Thank you. Will you just both, for the record, name and what position you hold?
Sure. I am Scott Carpenter. I am the superintendent at Monemoy Regional.
And Mike McMillan, the school business manager for Monemoy.
Thank you. Mary's supposed to remind me, but I remember.
So, so just to, to kind of talk about, where we are and how we got here. So we have done iterations of this presentation to your board, to the Chatham board, to our school committee. At the end of the day, we have a regional agreement that is just over 10 years old, and regional agreements are meant to be revisited, periodically. And so this is us bringing forward the sort of first revisiting of the regional agreement. One of the things about the regional agreement is that there was a lot of language that's really obsolete now. And in fact, the word Monemoy never shows up in the regional agreement because it predates the district having a name. So there's a lot of information in there about how you're going to bring the district together. There's also something that I have been very vocal about, that needs to be addressed in the regional agreement. It's really about creating better fiscal equity in how we approach the agreement, particularly as it pertains to funding for the 2 elementary schools. So when we looked at this and have talked to your board and talked with our committee and talked with the Chatham board, because there are so many things that actually need to get cleaned up, and there's some urgency at least to the second piece of this, the fiscal side of it. I think your board had mentioned, hey, would it be possible to look at it as a 2-step process? We've talked about it with our committee. We've talked about it with Chatham. And we've talked about it with the Department of Education, Deci. And so what we're proposing here is to do this as a 2-step process with this presentation and this iteration really focusing on all things fiscal. And with the intent that at a later town meeting, we would go back and clean up all of the obsolete language and everything else. So this is being addressed as a 2-step process. In terms of the understanding the fiscal challenge with the regional agreement, we have an economy of scales issue where we have 2 elementary schools that are radically different in size. One of them is almost 3 times the size of the other. So Chatham Elementary, quite small. Harwich Elementary, by comparison, much larger. The challenge is that if you want to offer the same program, the same services in 2 schools where one is very small and one's much larger, the larger school is more cost-effective to do that per pupil than at the smaller school. But the way our current regional agreement is laid out, it just looks at cost to run the school district purely by enrollment in the 2, the enrollment of the students that live in the 2 towns. At the moment, it's, for all intents and purposes, about 3/4 Harwich, because we have 3/4 of our students roughly coming from Harwich and 1/4 Chatham. So, so at the end of the day, you end up actually finding that the Chatham, or that the Harwich taxpayers end up paying for a big chunk of running the costs of the much smaller Chatham elementary schools. So to understand what that actually looks like, if we look at the Harwich elementary school budget, its elementary school budget, if you break it down to per pupil spending, it costs us in FY22 just over $12,000 to educate a child at Harwich Elementary School. Chatham Elementary School, in a much smaller building, to provide the same program, same services in that building, it costs us just over $19,000. So that $7,000 difference there, the Harwich taxpayers pay for 3/4 of that difference. So if you look at what does that, what does that mean? If we were to approach this and say in FY '22 dollars, the Harwich Elementary School, budget is just over $6 million. The Chatham Elementary School budget is $2.7 million. But Harwich taxpayers are funding, based on the enrollment split, Harwich taxpayers are funding the elementary schools, both of them combined, to the tune of, in FY '22 dollars, over $6.6 million. So if you compare $6.6 million is what the Harwich taxpayers are funding the elementary schools, according to the regional agreement, compared to if the Harwich taxpayers just paid for their own building, it's the difference between $6 million and $6.6 million. So there's the potential of around a $600,000 savings there. So what I've been sort of advocating for is a simple or more equitable approach would be to adjust some of the way the financing happens behind the regional agreement, to have each town pay for the cost of its own elementary school, and then still maintain the same high-quality programs in both buildings, but again, having it be more fiscally equitable for the taxpayers. It's really a win-win for all. It's definitely is going to support Harwich in terms of providing Harwich fiscal relief. On the Chatham side, I know some are concerned about what happens if it gets too expensive. But it has the town having to address the costs of running a smaller building, but it's a decision that the town is making in terms of funding that building and keeping and there's been we've heard a lot from in forums that we go to in Chatham. They want to make sure that they maintain an elementary school in their town, but you're maintaining that elementary school but not having it carried on the backs of taxpayers in Harwich. So in terms of different spots within the regional agreement that we'll talk about, so we'll go through essentially this document, but do it by way of a slide presentation. We're going to talk about how the school committee would vote on a budget. We'll talk about how school choice revenue is allocated, how the operating assessment's calculated, how capital assessments are calculated, how debt assessments are calculated, the timing of payments from the towns to the school district, and the last on what would happen in the future if the school district needs to incur debt. So these are the 8 different places in the regional agreement where there's some sort of language that is changing.
Scott, if I may, I'm going to interrupt you real quick.
Sure.
Any questions from the board for what we've already discussed? Mary?
No.
Don said no. Julie?
No.
Larry?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
And I know that I have sort of gone through that quickly because I know that your board has heard about that. This information will be posted on the school district's website, and people can go in and dive into the whole presentation and go to the hyperlinks as well.
Okay.
So in terms of things that
Excuse me for a second. Can we make sure there's a hyperlink on our town site that redirects to their site then so that people can easily look at this? Because we didn't get it until today.
We will ask Caleb and Jamie and through town administrator or staff. Anyone in the public that has any comments at any point of where we're at or questions, rather than lose them, if you jump up to the microphone, I'll recognize you.
everyone have access to. And we
Go ahead.
left copies for those in the audience if they want to have copies of both the presentation and the sort of revised one document to kind of suit both the proposed changes and the existing agreement. So if we sort of walk through those 8 spots, the first is language on how a school committee approves a budget. And this is actually dictated by Massachusetts general laws. So there's laws on how regional districts will operate. And Deci, the Department of Education, flagged this as one spot that should have been probably written differently when the district initially came together. So this is a don't shoot the messenger, but the Department of Ed is saying that the language that exists, and it's projected up here, has a flaw in it that goes against state law. So there is one sentence here, and it says, said proposed draft budget be approved by majority vote with at least one committee member from each town voting in the affirmative. Now, the reason that Deci's saying that there is an issue here that violates the law is that the state statute says that a regional school district budget is approved by majority vote, period. And to have a clause after it requiring something more than a majority could at any time be raised as an issue, and whoever raises it as an issue will prevail in the end because it violates the law. Is that it's a majority vote, period, not that there needs to be someone from each town or that somebody has to wear a blue shirt or whatever, that you can't have a clause to constrain majority. A majority is a majority is a majority. So I also fully recognize that for those in Chatham, this is a really important clause. Because for those in Chatham, elsewhere in the regional agreement, there's weighted voting. And there's weighted voting because there are roughly twice as many people that live in Harwich than Chatham. So there's twice the school committee votes in Harwich than in Chatham. And that sort of mirrors the one person, one vote concept in that the Harwich representatives are representing twice the number of people. So there's a weighting to the school committee votes so that every Harwich member has a full vote and every Chatham member has a half vote. So there are 6 votes out of 8 people, but it is conceivable that all Harwich could vote one direction and there would be a majority, and all Chatham could vote another direction, and that they would be defeated in that case. The reality is, in the entire time that the district has been together, I believe there was only one vote in all the time, and it was over something completely petty. It wasn't a budget, where there wasn't some consensus and some. I think there was one vote in the 9 years that I've been here where by some random chance there was all the Chatham folks went one direction and all the Harwich went the other, and it had nothing to do with budgets. So the reality with how we operate and develop budgets, we have a budget subcommittee that has half Harwich representatives, half Chatham representatives. The business manager and the superintendent present budgets. We work with that committee. That committee comes up with a consensus. They essentially vote and move forward something that has votes from both towns, and that moves forward to the full committee. And the full committee then ultimately votes a budget. And we, in the last 9 years, have never had a situation where you need it to have it. The budgets have passed by unanimously. We haven't had somebody from from one town saying no, or so on some level this is moot. But I understand where some of the angst is there. So in the proposal here, because I am very sensitive to the fact that clause in the existing regional agreement means a lot to folks in Chatham. So what we've tried to do is what's underlined here is what the Department of Education wants to make sure it says emphatically, that said proposed budget shall be approved by majority vote of the regional district school committee, period. But before that, there is a process that is laid out in stone in the regional agreement that has that consensus building that involves members of Harwich and members of Chatham at the subcommittee level that are moving forward to the full committee a proposed budget with support from at least one person from each town. So that's what we're trying to do to at least come up with that middle ground approach, knowing that the Department of Education is very clearly saying, you know, we want to make sure that this one sentence reads this, period.
Done.
Before I lose this thought, thank you, Mr. Chair. I hate weighted votes, so I have to bring this up. Over here, you got people, and over here, you got votes. They are not one and the same. Elsewhere in the agreement, it specifies, that a representative from Chatham has half of a vote of a representative from Harwich. How does that fit in with it?
So
I mean,
at
is
the-
that a real people vote where they?
At the subcommittee level, the weighted voting only happens at votes that happen at the table. At the subcommittee level, it's a person's vote is a person's vote. So this would ensure that you have that Chatham weigh-in, but they don't go with weighted voting at the.
So that's really one person, one vote.
Right.
As opposed to in the major part of the agreement where it's one person, half a vote.
Right.
Okay.
But a great question. So that is how the committee operates at the subcommittee level. It is not weighted voting at the subcommittee level.
Julie?
And so just to reiterate, so that's just clarification. That's just the state trying to say, the way you had it before is not really adheres to the guidelines that we have for all other towns. So
Right.
we're just clarifying here that your vote is the vote of the committee from both sides.
Right. And the state's just clarifying that this is the way the law reads.
Right.
That, I'm sorry that 10 years ago, the attorneys that looked at this didn't catch it, but this is the way the law reads. It needs to say this.
Right.
And it's us saying, okay, well, we understand that this is what you want to say. Do understand, both towns, that there is a process that we use at the subcommittee level
Right.
that does have buy-in. It is not, this district is not and will not be controlled by one town or the other. There is a buy-in that happens at the table, and both at the school committee table, but also at the subcommittee level.
Yeah, and I'm only saying that for clarification for people watching, right, that really nothing is changing here, it's clarification. So, because sometimes people are alarmists and things get misconstrued.
And are you in that document that you're going to present to town meeting and we're going to put on our website? Can we pick another color besides blue and red and put required by law?
We can do that. So we do that. We do the required thing. I think if you notice in the explanatory boxes, which if we can use those, again, I think it's up to the towns, but we start off on the two spots. There are two spots that Deci weighed in. It's the first one here, and it'll be the last one we
Okay.
talk about. We start off by saying this change is required by Deci.
Thank you.
This isn't the school committee saying we should do this, and it's Deci clarifying that, that even if you didn't want to change it, this is the way the law actually reads. This is how the regional agreement will operate, period, because you can't have that comma and some clause that constrains a majority vote.
Thank you.
The second spot in the regional agreement that changes is additional language. And just to kind of quickly orient people between the two documents. The first document here is the original regional agreement, and it's not until you get to 7 pages into it that you see that suddenly the document now changes to landscape, and has the two sections, and the section number one that we talked about, shows up on the top of the 8th page. The next section that we talk about is at the bottom of that budget section. And it's just adding a new clause, into that, under C6, that under the budget section, that talks about how we'll use school choice revenue. Because at the moment, school choice revenue comes into the district. So we get roughly $5,000 for every child from Dennis or Brewster or Yarmouth or Orleans who chooses to come to Monemoy. And we use that money because it's coming in to the district. We use it as one pot and allocate it to offset the staffing line for the district. But if we're going through and saying, okay, towns, each of you are going to pay for your own elementary school, we don't want to ever be in a situation where somebody might say, well, you're using more of that school choice money to go and offset Harwich Elementary than Chatham Elementary, or so we want to make sure that we're being equitable with how the school choice revenue is coming in. So basically, we're taking the revenue stream that's coming in and simply saying that we're going to allocate that revenue stream based on the proportion of students that go to each of the buildings. So you take that and just equitably break it out. So if we're looking at it by how many students are in each silo, it's broken. It just sort of spells it out there. Again, it's adding something to provide additional clarity to set the stage for each town paying for its own elementary school. The next one gets into how the district will calculate the assessment. And I could turn this one over maybe to Michael, but it really, I think the last time we were here, Michael sort of walked through the mathematical complexity, the calculus behind it, to sort of equitably break out how much does it cost to run Harwich Elementary School, Chatham Elementary School, the middle school, the high school, and central office. But we do in our budget, you can go into any budget from any year and look at how much does it cost for Harwich Elementary School, how much does it cost for Chatham Elementary School. So it's really taking that and again, making sure that we have a clearly laid out method on how those costs are getting divvied and assessed. I don't know if you want to chime in any more on that, Mike?
No, I mean, yeah, so basically we'll split the budget up into those three portions, one for each of the elementary schools and everything else. And then it gets complicated because you then apply the minimum local contribution, which the state requires, has to be allocated to each pot, and also revenue gets allocated to each. And then what's left is what's assessed to the town. So each town has to pay for its elementary school. And then the regional and middle and high school budgets are split up between the two towns, much like they currently are. So the short version is each town pays for its elementary school, and then they split up the rest as it happens.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, there are problems and there are problems. What's the magnitude of school choice in terms of numbers of kids? Just so everybody understands what we're talking about, because we're not talking about half of your enrollment.
No. I don't have the exact number, but we're.
I do. If you
Michael.
keep talking, I'll have it in a minute.
Don't encourage either of us.
It's like 1.4 million in revenue versus say some 1.1 in it costs, because we also pay for students who are leaving.
So there are students that come into the district, there are students that leave the district. Yeah, and we are one of two districts in the area that actually have more families want to come here than want to go elsewhere. And but we also have very strategically used school choice so that we're not opening additional classrooms and bringing in more students than we need, because that's a fiscally, you end up bringing in more costs than money. If there's only, our per pupil expenditure is north of $15,000 and you're only bringing in $5,000, if you do that enough times, it doesn't pay for the cost of the teacher teaching assistant benefit costs and that, so.
My
so-
only
so we
point
use-
was is that you're not encouraging dozens and dozens of people to do this, so this is not driving your entire budget.
Right,
No, so
right.
across the whole district, we
Right.
have around 152 students leaving, but we have more students coming in. We have like 240 coming in. So,
But, we really are looking at, filling an empty seat in this classroom, an empty seat in that classroom, not taking at any one grade level and saying, here's 35, 35, kids from a neighboring community. So in this section, which is section 9, there's the operating costs that Michael talked about, and then the way the assessment breaks out is there are capital costs. So there's the way the existing regional agreement reads, and the existing regional agreement, is really looking at, at the time was looking at high school, middle school, elementary school, that you're taking these capital costs and splitting them out based on the enrollment. But now what we're saying is, okay, towns, if you're funding your own elementary schools, you're responsible for the capital costs on that building. Chatham and Harwich, you're responsible for the capital cost at Harwich Elementary School. So there's a shift here in how the capital costs are addressed, so that middle school and high school, it's based on the enrollment. Elementary schools, towns, you're responsible for your own capital costs. In the next section, it's on debt, which is the next portion of the way an assessment calculation is done, and the debt happens the exact same way. The original language had, basically said that debt that would be for the region would be split based on enrollment, and there was some pre-existing debt at Chatham Elementary School that's already been paid off, so that, at the middle school that's already been paid off, so that piece that was in the old language is moot. And now it goes to say that essentially middle school and high school, the two towns are responsible for that based on the enrollment, but debt that happens for Harwich Elementary or for Chatham Elementary, that would be, the responsibility of the town. And we have been talking about, that in the near future, there will be a roofing project that will be needed at Chatham Elementary School and at the middle school. So the roof at Chatham Elementary School, if there's debt to be incurred or capital costs to be incurred for that, the town of Chatham would be responsible for that. But the roof at the middle school, if there's debt or capital costs that are incurred there, that would be the responsibility of both towns based on the percentage of students that attend the district from each town. So there's also a section on how debt is calculated that is just completely obsolete. It talks about, the debt that, that would happen, pre-regional, or pre-construction of the regional high school and the formation of the middle school, but all of that has been done, so this whole section becomes obsolete. Next one is timing of payments. So there's a section in the regional agreement that basically says, it says these are the months that the regional school district will get funding coming in from Chatham and funding coming in from Harwich. For the last 10 years, this has not been how it has worked. Instead, the towns have worked out a good system on their own, even before I got here, where Chatham provides the funding in August, October, December, February, April, March, May, and June, and Harwich in the other months, and pays that sort of their portion over those months. So what the change here is, it's simply following how the district actually operates as opposed to what was laid out 10 years ago. And last but not least is there is some Deci required language on incurring debt. So in the future, and there is not a proposal out there to incur any debt, but in the future, should there be a need to incur debt, the existing language says that the regional school, that the district school committee by majority vote will choose to go one of two different routes to incur debt. By majority vote, the Department of Education is saying that incurring debt does not require a majority vote, incurring debt requires a 2/3 vote. So they clarify that majority needs to be 2/3, and the Department of Education wants the district to choose the two, so the original agreement says you can use subsection D of Chapter 71, Section 16, or N. And I'll kind of, give you the cliff notes of D or N. D requires that the school district incur the debt by a vote at a town meeting. N goes a step forward, or further than that, and says that there needs to be a vote at town meeting and a vote at the polls to approve it. So the method here that those that I've talked to on the school committee felt appropriate is to follow the same method that was followed when the district came together and borrowed for the high school, which is a town meeting vote and a vote ultimately at the polls. So, so to specify that we'll use N, but but by statute, there is an option to choose D, but that can only happen by a 2/3 vote. And those are the fiscal changes in a nutshell.
Any questions, Larry?
Good explanation. Thank you very much for your hard work, and other than that, I have none.
Julie?
Yeah,
Mary?
thank you.
No, this was a brilliant way to depict it. I
Don?
thank you.
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to say is I appreciate you doing this because there was so many moving parts in the other mechanism that you could easily see the baby getting thrown out with the wash water. Because the one sticking point, and we've discussed this through the years, is that the agreement calls for both town meetings to opine on things, and anything that appears to structurally change that, like reconfiguring the schools without doing that, would have wound up putting the whole thing in peril. So I appreciate the fact that you put that aside and you're concentrating on just the parity of the economics.
It also, by putting together a document that has the original agreement and just the proposed changes lining up, in each section side by side, and getting rid of a red line where in some cases there'd be an entire page is lined out except one word. I mean, the red line was just so hard to read. And at the end of the day, we want to have people who go to town meeting be able to go and see side by side, what are they asking? And between the two, what we've presented is just extracting side by side those specific sections, but you can also see the whole document, side by side.
So following up on that, where are you? Because there's 2 town meetings, there's 2 boards of selectmen, there's the school committee. What's been approved so far and by whom?
So I think we will be going to our committee, again, and talking about this meeting. My understanding is that we have at least, I think there's been a tentative vote or a vote by your body to support fiscal, the fiscal pieces here. And I will fully acknowledge that there are 2 things that we talked about tonight, the Deci required change on the front end and the Deci required change on the back end, that Michael and I just got from, feedback from Deci, over the holiday break period. So those are new to your group. We'll be discussing those with our committee at Thursday's meeting. But at the end of the day, we need to get a vote from your group, a vote from our school committee. Michael and I have sent this to Chatham as well, and we'll ultimately need to do sort of an updated presentation and walk them and get a vote at their board, and then move forward from there.
That's why I brought it up, because ultimately, the process is these are town meeting articles on a warrant. We have not taken any kind of vote on that. On the concept, we have, but we haven't taken any kind of vote to support an article language, because it's all in the language. So the sooner you can do that, the better, because then the public gets the chance to see, this is what the article is, and this is what it does.
Right.
Well, we're going to create that article, not school committee.
Well, we can't vary from what their agreement is, because it's got to be the exact same language as the other town is voting on, or it nullifies the votes.
But we can vote and instruct the town administrator to work with Dr. Carpenter to create the warrant article, which we'll then later vote
Yeah,
when we
I
read.
actually think I think the district's, our school district's attorney could generate what that warrant article could look like, so it would be, then we could share that with both your committee and with the Chatham committee, so, so we've got the same.
But again, there's a bunch of votes that have to happen,
Yeah.
because this isn't the end, this is the beginning.
Right.
Mary?
I don't see why we wouldn't vote to approve this, at least get our piece of it out of the way.
I agree.
No, I agree.
Me too, yeah.
I agree with that, Mary.
I'm going to call on Don to make the motion.
Sure you would. I vote we.
Because of your tie, Don.
Hang on, before you make a motion, recognize John Chory.
I'm going to call for public comment. Call for public comment
Just
in the
did.
audience. Okay. I'm not going to say too much, because I think Charlie's going to mention a lot more than I'm going to say with much more eloquent. John Chory. Very good. Dr.
Finance
Carpenter
Committee.
And Michael.
Just John Chory.
And just John Chory, yeah. This is all well and good. I understand the language, pretty darn good. And but what I'd like to hear is some numbers attached to that language. Last year we heard roughly $600,000 was going to be shifted from Chatham to Harwich. That was the FY22 budget. FY23 budget, I don't know where you are in the process of that, but I'm guessing it's going to be higher than the FY22 budget. So that $600,000 is going to be higher. Don't know what that higher number is. If it's $1 million, Chatham might feel differently. If it's 500,000, it must be feel differently. I'd like to see some numbers attached with that. And also, this is just looking at the funding of the elementary school budget. This is just a stopgap agreement proposal. It's not the full proposal, which we've talked about in the past with looking at the equity of towns, populations of towns, and student enrollment. I'd like to know where we are on that component of the regional school agreement. The first one I'm very interested in is the budget, and the numbers of what potential savings to the taxpayers of Harwich is.
Sure.
And, or you want to wait to Charlie, or you can answer my
Yeah,
question?
I can answer it in round numbers. So we're in the process of developing the FY23 budget, and just, just as John said,
I'm having a really good night. All right? So I don't want to talk about the budget. I'd like to just focus on the savings based on the changes.
yeah, so.
I do too, yeah.
Yeah, so the answer is yes, 600,000 is going to be more in the upcoming fiscal year. In fact, I got this all started with the paper that I wrote that was projecting far off into the future if the two elementary schools sort of diverged so that one only had one class of students per grade level and the other was at 5, that that what is currently in FY22 in the $600,000 range would be well north of $1 million, and it will. What we anticipate is that in FY23, it's going to start getting pretty close to that 900-ish thousand dollars. It's going to be going there because in the last several months, just the way the pandemic and everything else played out in terms of the enrollment in the two towns, in our schools, we saw, again, one school, Harwich Elementary is maintaining more enrollment than what we're seeing at Chatham Elementary. So we're seeing the difference in size, and the economy of scale issue continue to grow. And as long as the two schools continue to get further apart in size, the number would keep growing and growing. And then in terms of the other piece that John was alluding to, this is something I brought forward because it's really easy for me as a school superintendent to just say to my committee and to select boards and say, hey, here's Chatham Elementary School's budget, here's Harwich Elementary School's budget, here's how much it would actually cost if you were paying for your own elementary schools. That one's in my wheelhouse. I think to come up with a different way that you're assessing the region, I think would require two towns, select boards, finance committees working together. That one's not a school superintendent can kind of put his finger on it and sit there and say, it's like, okay, here's how much here's how, what your year-round population is. Because I think what John was talking to, and I definitely understand it, there are a few districts out there that look at other things besides foundation enrollment. So our regional agreement and the funding of it is all about foundation enrollment. When you look at the other half of how the district is funded, which is this minimum required contribution that Michael and I talk to every year, behind that number that Deci calculates, that's the Department of Ed calculates and says, towns, this is how much you need to fund your schools. At the end of the day, that is driven by foundation enrollment. It's not driven by other factors nearly as much, foundation enrollment. So everything about this regional agreement, both what the state's requiring and what's actually in the language of this document, is all predicated on foundation enrollment. And I think if you're going to come up with another mechanism, that's I think involves two towns working with each other on what is that alternative mechanism.
And I think we all agree on that, but we also all agree that we can get something done this year if we go this route. Joe's not here to say how many days until town meeting, but it's 100.
It's pretty soon.
Change. It's pretty soon. So we will get back to that, and Mary is on a working group. I know you guys haven't met, but I imagine soon you're going to meet. So those questions, John, certainly are questions that will stay on the forefront, and I know Selectman Howell has pushed this, and we want to make sure we get that done. We're not going to get it done this year. Not possible. Don?
Before a motion, I agree with John, but I also am somewhat interested before you make any kind of motion about, there's a second front that just got opened here, the school choice. It may not be a large front, but as we're getting the real simple concept of, okay, there's this school, it costs this much to operate, it's in your town, that's yours. This school has this much, and it takes to operate it, and that's your responsibility over here. That was pretty simple. This change that you're pitching also has a change to how you're allocating school choice, unless you're telling me it's completely neutral and it's just a restating in a different way. But I'm assuming that it has some cost implication.
I would argue that how we as a district have tried to approach school choice is to look at it as a revenue by approaching it as a district as I call it a free seat model. In fact, I'll credit Carolyn Cregan for this quote when I was coming here trying to understand the landscape. And we have classrooms. In some of our, we usually focus on school choice at the elementary level, and we'll have some classrooms that will have, let's say, 15 children in the room. And Dr. Cregan said to me, she's like, Scott, we have an option. We can get a $5,000 check for two of those seats and bring that class size from 15 to 17, or those two chairs can get dust on them. So we have approached school choice from a let's fill some free seats, and have it be a revenue stream.
Can I
But-
just cut
but
to the
what we-
chase, though, because it's really not about all that big a discussion. You got a change in language. What does it do to the bill that you send us? That's all I care about, because the school committee is going to have to worry about the other, whether policy-wise you want to fill the seat or
So
don't.
from that end, it ends up being a neutral change.
It's more about, so we've always had to take that school choice revenue and apportion it between the schools, and this just gives you some consistent, sort of clear way of doing it.
That's all I care about,
Yeah.
because I'm sure the FinCom's going to want to know that, too. Okay, this language changes. Does it give us more money? Does it take more money away, or is it,
Yeah,
or is it
because
neutral?
because currently we take that pot of school choice money that comes in, and we offset staffing costs, so that, so that at the moment, that offset is essentially 3/4 Harwich, 1/4 Chatham. What this does is it makes sure that if we're allocating funding at the elementary level by building, that we're taking the percentage of students who go to Chatham Elementary School, and they get that percentage of it's because Chatham Elementary has this percent of the kids, Harwich Elementary this percent, the middle school this percent, high school. So it splits it out that way, but it should have no impact in terms of the town's bottom line when it comes to that piece of it.
That's it. That's all I was asking.
Okay.
Charles Gruska, 6 Teaberry Ave in Harwich. I think you all have gotten enough input from me, more than you could handle and process in writing. So I'm just attaching a name to a face for some of you. And also, just want to, since it's a public hearing, want to be one taxpayer making a public statement for the benefit of the public who may be listening in on this particular matter. I'll skip all the background information, but you know that I'm an educator who worked in a 5-town regional school district that had to deal with all the issues that we're currently talking about in funding the schools here in the Monemoy district. I'm very big on education. Since I moved to Harwich in 2015 permanently, after having come down here for some 40-odd years to visit with in-laws, I've involved myself in the schools, and I've served on a number of committees for the school department as a community representative. It's given me an opportunity to spend time during the school day in the school and really get a good assessment of the schools. You know that I'm very bullish on the Monemoy schools because of my background and what I've observed. And a lot of the bullishness for the schools has to do with the fact of the school budget that Monemoy has operated off of. When I moved to Harwich, I quite frankly couldn't believe the budget that was funding the schools here, because I couldn't believe all of the class sizes and the services, programs, curriculum that were being offered here. Frankly, I didn't think that those existed in hardly any school systems across the state. So I was pleasantly shocked when I came to Monemoy and saw what I saw, and then began to study the budget that supported that and how could that be because of the budget struggles that I saw struggling within my own district. I had an over-hour meeting with Katie Arsenio, the business manager at the time, because I was incredulous with what I was seeing on the budget, and she assured me that I was on target, that in fact the school system had a budget which supported an expectation for high-quality education in the district, and the district should be held accountable to that. I think the district is proving that in many ways, and I'm very pleased that I have 2 grandchildren who live in the Nauset district, but have been attending school choice at Monemoy, and I'm thrilled with their choice, because when I lived inland, Nauset was considered inland as one of the premier districts in the state, and definitely the district on the Cape. I'm
Charles,
thrilled my kids are going to Monemoy.
If I may, I'm going
Now,
to give you
getting to
a
the point.
tiny bit of latitude because there's not a line of people behind you to speak. but let's try and keep this related to the amendments.
Sure, that's what I'm
Please.
getting to. I just wanted,
Yep.
the
No,
public to
thank
know
you.
the background.
Thank you.
So I just got my, as we all did, our annual Christmas present from the town in the mail last week, my tax bill. My bill is going up $800. My taxes are going up. That'll bring it a total of an increase of $1,500 since 2015 when I moved here. I'm happy to pay those taxes because of the services that are being provided through those taxes in the town, including the quality schools, which I think are super important because of the impact of the schools, and I think they relate to the quality of every other department because everybody working in every department got their skills, training, and caring from their schools and from their families. We're here because the Chatham Elementary School has become less and less cost-effective to operate. And we're here also because it's getting more and more difficult for the town of Harwich with its assessment to support the kind of quality school system that we've had over the years and all the other departments that the select board is involved and responsible for overseeing. There was a solution to that cost effectiveness. It was proposed by the administration. It was supported by the school committee, and that was to take the elementary schools and fill them to capacity and operate certain grades in one building and other grades in another building with a kind of regionalized approach to elementary education. It didn't receive a lot of resistance from what I could see in Harwich. And you may know me as the one who, next to playing the accordion, my main hobby in life is following school budgets in the community where I live and advocating and speaking at meetings like this, which I've done for several years. In Chatham, however, there was considerable resistance, and it appears that people in Chatham seemed to communicate that they wanted to keep running their own separate elementary school. And I can respect that. I'm a big advocate for parents having a big say in terms of the education of their children and what takes place in the schools. However, as a taxpayer, the time has come for me to say, I can't support my tax dollars subsidizing the Chatham Elementary School. I want my tax dollars, and I'm willing to pay them. And I'd pay even more, and you probably can't even ask for more from me because of the borders you're set as limits of how far we can tax. But I don't want to be having my dollars subsidizing Chatham just because they want to keep their small elementary school. I want my dollars subsidizing, I want my dollars supporting, every dollar supporting education for the district. And for Harwich assessment to be utilized to support the total education for all of the students at the district at all grade levels in both towns. So we're at a point, especially if I'm going to see $800 jumps in my taxes, and I'm anticipating a lot of that going into the future with all that we're dealing with in the town of Harwich. I want to say I support this particular amendment. I think it's a no-brainer for Harwich. I'd like to share with you what I see as some of the arguments that are going to be run into both here in town and in Chatham, so that you could perhaps deal with those arguments if they come up. And I wish on this one particular item that I was a Chatham taxpayer speaking to a Chatham board at a Chatham public meeting, but I'm not. The arguments that are going to be heard are going to be centered around either what's wrong with the current process. We agreed, or the towns agreed 11 years ago or whatever, to a funding formula for the district. And there is fairness right now because that was a contract. That was agreed to, and until that contract is changed, as there's a proposal to do now, it's fair to stick with that contract. The strong argument that people will make, and maybe much more so in Chatham than here, is that the fairest way to fund education is by student enrollment. And that is the number of students receiving services should generate the amount of support, financial support the town gives. However, as you've heard this evening and before from Dr. Carpenter, the state, well, what you didn't hear was that the state really wanted to have other factors, especially wealth and affordability, be a part of that formula. And I didn't know until this past year that the reason that that's not happening and that the minimum contribution, which is the main driver, a significant driver of the budget, is done on enrollment because there's a ceiling that the state has put in to that formulation. And that ceiling cancels out any wealth or affordability benefits that Chatham has over Harwich, puts us at the same level. So, as Dr. Carpenter said, that's an issue at the state level, and I've had a lot of experience trying to change things at a state level, and you know it takes forever, and it's often fruitless. So it's got to be something dealt with within the towns, and that this is definitely a first step in that direction. I don't think anyone, and other arguments on fairness, I don't think anyone ever envisioned when the region was formed, I wasn't here, but I don't think it was envisioned that 11 years after regional agreement was signed, that the town of Chatham still would not have been paying an assessment that matched an assessment that they were paying prior to regionalization. And I don't think anyone envisioned that 11 years after that document was signed that that would happen. I may be wrong on that. And I don't think they envisioned that, on the contrary, Harwich would be paying $7 million more than they paid in the last year prior to regionalization, but that's what is the difference in the FY22 budget. Or that Chatham, over these 11 years, would have saved nearly $16 million versus if they had even continued to pay at exactly the same level that they were paying in the last year prior to regionalization. And that Harwich would have paid $34 million more than they would have if they had still been paying all these years at the same level pre-regionalization, for a nearly $50 million deficit. So if someone raises the issue of fairness in these discussions and in these debates, I think that's something to ask. And something to ask is it fair, should a town that has 55% of the property valuation as of FY21 figures and 33% of the total population of the two towns pay only 25% and reducing percentage of the costs of running the schools? Is that fair? And I want to emphasize that I think even with the approval of the amendment, Chatham is not going, if this amendment goes through both towns, Chatham will still not be paying an assessment that's at a level that they paid prior to regionalization. And even if the amendment passes, the school budget will probably still have a shortfall. The current budget for FY22 went through the school committee with $600,000 of items that weren't included in the budget for funding. Some of those have subsequently been able to be funded, but the budget that went through had that shortfall with a 1% budget increase, which resulted in a 2% assessment increase for Harwich. It's unrealistic with the inflation that we are now experiencing and projected to run well into the future, that the school department or any department is going to be able to maintain a level program, an equal level of programming and services on a 1% increase in assessment. It's just not. And so I think that's got to be kept in mind, that this is a first step, a definite step, a no-brainer for Harwich, but hopefully some of these fairness arguments can be made effectively somewhere along the line. I don't have the answer to that, how that happens with the folks in Chatham when they go to decide on this. And I appreciate the opportunity to provide the input and the respect and respectful listening that the Select Board is always giving to me when I provide that. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for all the information you've provided this board. Hopefully you'll attend the meetings with Mary when we're negotiating with Chatham. This is yeah, good.
If not, I'm going to have them on speed dial.
Okay. This is, as you said, a no-brainer for Harwich. We're going to save another $600,000. I don't really see any residents saying, I don't want to save that money. Chatham's where we're going to have the problem. And maybe not, because maybe they recognize the same thing that you recognize. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You'll forgive me, I'm not going to use colors. I'm just going to stick to text here. I move that we support the so-called step one of changing the Monemoy Regional School Agreement as presented tonight. And I'm not going any further than that.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion from the board.
No, I'm in full agreement. You know, we've talked about this for some time now. You listed two-step phases. I think as we've noted ourselves in the public comment, we're seeing this as a three-stage process. The third stage will be the difficult discussion, but we'll come back to that.
And let's just take a vote. All in favor? Aye, 5-0. Will you work with your attorney, our town administrator, and ultimately council to create a warrant article sooner rather than later so that we can get this widespread for support? Please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
In only one color.
We're going to skip the town administrator's report, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Selectmen's report, Don?
Nothing.
Mary?
Nothing.
Julie? Larry?
Nothing.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.